All right. It says we're live, so that's good. Welcome to a very special, actually, episode of PKs on Air. Really good that you guys are all joining us. We have, as you can see on the screen, probably much more than the usual two suspects.
Yep.
Nevertheless, though, I'm quite happy that, of course, my fantastic co-host Dominique is there as well. Dominique, how's Berlin?
Yeah,
Sunny?
it's sunny. Yeah, that's new.
We're getting there.
But nevertheless, yeah, not that exciting. So the situation didn't change during last week. So
Yeah, let's
nothing really
not
new.
talk about COVID. No. This is
No,
we're not
please,
gonna ruin.
please
We're
not.
not gonna ruin this one.
No.
Not gonna happen. We have from the PK's team joining Julia. You have seen her a couple of times, I think, on the stream as well. Paul, who's running our paid social team, and very, very excited for two of our international guests to join us. Actually, I can call them not only, I think, experts in their fields, but even more so, and that's probably more important these days, very good friends as well. We go back long time for both of them. We have Cindy Krum, who has just told us that it's 8 a.m. Very early. So thank you very much for joining at this early time. That's highly appreciated. And then we have none other than my good friend Mike King, who is probably joining from New York, if I'm not totally mistaken, right, Mike?
Yes, indeed.
Fantastic. Yeah, see, early riser. Oh, you have kids, right? So you're kind of used to it.
Yeah. Used to it.
Yeah,
Get used to it.
Fair enough. Yeah, so we have, which is really crazy. I mean, I said we're not going to talk about COVID. That's true for the most part, I guess. But like, I think one of the reasons, and this is also what we have of like first year's, go figure, I never thought we'd make it that far actually, first year's birthday episode of something that started out of a stupid idea with Dominique and I thinking, well, we need to do something while, client work is a bit slow and we might to kind of get stuff out there, because there's like, I mean, and we have met at conferences around the globe on many occasions. No conferences, right? So I mean, except for virtual, which is not really a replacement, so to speak. So yeah, it has been an interesting year also for us, I guess. I mean, equally for you guys, I imagine. And I thought it would be nice to just kind of share the virtual room, let's put it that way, with friends for like for 1 year's kind of mini celebration, which is it's actually quite cool. So yeah, before we get into it, and I think we have a bunch of questions and also topics that we kind of want to cover in the next hour, and maybe some very quick housekeeping notes just to kind of get you all on the same page. So for those that kind of do this or watch this more often, we have kind of the recaps, the show notes, and all of that stuff on pa.ag/notes. So this one's going to go there come end of the week. So you find the kind of slide decks there. You find like the videos and some summaries, and oftentimes you kind of discuss certain articles and links, as we're probably going to do today as well. So you will find them there as well. Feel free to kind of poke around and kind of just follow up. Or if you're not watching this live, but afterwards, I mean, shame on you. But there's also some kind of follow up stuff there for you to consume. And I think then the other thing, if you would want to join the discussion, we should be live on Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, and some others. Feel free to just comment there, and we try to kind of pick it up from there as well. Try to answer any questions that you guys might have. I think we're okay, strong on the SEO front. We have PPC in the room. We have Paul that kind of is a social genius, if you so will. So I think we have it all covered. So it should be good. So to get things going, I want to kick off with a more kind of generic topic, but even before we go there, I have like one specific one for Mike, and then so Cindy can kind of get more coffee and I take her afterwards. So Mike, I think you are actually also a bit bored these days, and writing a book, is that something that you kind of committed yourself to? How did that happen?
It's something I've wanted to do for a while, and
right.
I just didn't know who to talk to make it happen. So eventually I ended up signing a publishing deal with Wiley, and I'm writing a book called The Science of SEO, and it's more of like a computer science book about SEO rather than just like a business book.
Right. So the kind of the focus is as one would expect from you, more like on the tech side, or is it a bit of a hybrid in between? So what's your kind of, if you can already?
It's more on the tech side. So it's more, no one truly knows how Google's algorithms work, but you can get close to some degree if you really dig into like information retrieval and natural language processing and all that type of stuff. So the book is about all those concepts and then how they might be used by Google to build Google. So as part of the book, I walk people through like how you would build your own search engine so you can better understand like what goes into understanding content, like what is tokenization, what are all those different concepts and so on. So you can, have a more educated understanding of what's happening when Google makes adjustments.
Interesting. So what's the without putting you on the spotlight, what's the due date of this entire project?
Yeah, so I'm supposed to be done writing by Q3, I believe, and then we go through a bunch of editing, and then it's supposed to come out in the beginning of Q1 for 2022.
Right. And how much time, are you allocating on it right now, just out of curiosity? Because I imagine you're very busy. You run an agency. You guys do crazy lots of things. You speak on still on conferences, similar to some of us as well. Like how do you manage? Is that going well or?
Well, it's super difficult, but like you said, there's far less conferences, so I don't have to travel anywhere near as much. And like I said, I'm also getting up earlier. So what I'm doing is like Tuesdays and Thursdays, I write. Saturdays from like 9 to 3, I write. And, just here and there when something pops into my head, I'm like, oh, let me throw this paragraph into the Word document.
Okay. Yeah.
It's not, I already write a lot when I write blog posts. So I'm just hoping that as I get more into the rhythm of writing this book, it'll just become a bit more natural. But right now, it's pretty difficult.
Can I throw something in here, Bastian?
Absolutely. Please.
Years ago, I wrote a book. It's still available. It still gets 4.5 out of 5 stars, even though it's really old and I actually don't recommend it. It's too old. But Mike, if you have not watched the TED Talk by the woman who wrote Eat, Pray, Love, I know Eat, Pray, Love is a totally different kind of book, but her TED Talk is incredible because she taught. Have you seen it?
No.
She talks about how sometimes you get a rush of ideas and they just come so easily, it just flows. And then other times you have to tweeze every word out of your veins. Like it's just painful. Yeah. And I thought it was actually a really great TED Talk.
No, I think what you just described is like the reason why I only write as often as I do. Because like I only want to do it when it's super easy, like you described. It's just like it just comes out. Yeah. And then other times it's like I don't like any of these words, so I'm not gonna do this. But when you write a book, you can't really allow yourself to do that. You just gotta like keep writing and then come back and edit it.
That's why I never took a column too. I don't want to write stuff just to fill pages. Yeah. If there's nothing to say, then I've got better things to do.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah, it's quite funny that you say that, Cindy. Like I think we are one of the also as an agency here, we are one of the worst when it comes to publishing anything. Like we literally don't publish anything at all. Just I don't know, for whatever reason that is. Maybe it's because we all like all Germans can't write. I don't know if that's true or not, but it's really bad. It's really bad. Honestly, I'm not kidding. I know there's a lot of agencies, especially in the UK as well, which we kind of more tend to look at because we work relatively international, if you so will. But and they publish a lot of stuff, and sometimes it feels a bit like as you've been saying, it has been written because someone needed to write this, and you're like. But on the other hand, there's a lot of good stuff going, and I just I can't manage to get my head around. I even struggle when people ask me for certain contributions as much as I can manage. But writing is I know all of the other ones in here. I don't think I've ever seen a blog post from you, Julia, if I'm not totally wrong.
I have written a recap of a conference.
A recap of a conference.
Great.
Yeah.
Okay. I have also written some blog posts.
Yeah, right. Come on, guys.
But years ago, definitely. Yeah. So I'm
not a writer.
Same issue. So when I feel I need to produce content now, for having content there, without having so much to say in this moment, or I do not have the creativity path open in that moment, it's not going to work. It takes hours and days sometimes for creating stuff for, 1,000 words. So exactly the same.
But then I think it's quite funny because I mean, Cindy, I think some of the articles that got like a lot of attention from your end, I think that was last year, right? Was the kind of series on, or was it even before, like the Fraggle?
We're the same. That was something that I was like, this is important and no one's talking about it. We're gonna write about it. And then I just go way too deep and too long, or I liked it, but for most consumption, too deep and too long. But then we're just tired and we're burnt out and we're like, that was hard. Let's not do that again for a while.
Yeah, I can imagine. Because I mean, they were massive, right? They were like crazy long pieces. I mean, again, like as you've been saying, and I think you could see it from like consuming it. Like you were very, very deep into the and I think that also sets them apart, right? From what has been. I mean, there was not much there anyways, but what has been there was not really in depth. It was just like generic scratching on the surface kind of pieces. So I think this also gave you, and I think this is also something that kind of can come off if you do it properly, like gave your brand and your name kind of some more, reputation and kind of trustworthiness as a kind of thought leader in that area, right?
Well, and it inspired us to do a lot of things to help with the consumption of the long blog posts, like add summaries and jump links, and context and video summaries, and the screen reader. We now have they're so long that I didn't want people to actually have to read them, so they can just hit play and the robot.
Okay, that's nice. I see. So I mean, since we already at this already, kind of to an extent, right? I think one of the areas that I think both you and I kind of spoke a lot about when we met, we were still allowed to meet in person, let's say, and I think also was one of the, I guess, the Oktoberfest talks that you did was a concept around like what you called Fraggles at the time, and I think this is something that we kind of see literally everywhere right now. So what's the current? I mean, especially you guys in the US are somewhat in a situation that you kind of see newer stuff a bit earlier than we kind of get to see it in Europe, and then I mean the rollout even takes way longer. So what's the kind of current state of affairs? Like when you look at Google search results right now, and what is your expectation? What are we going to see? Again, it's hard to say, but like come like 6-12 months time, is that a trend that's continuing? Is it more fragmentation? Is it new stuff? Is it something else? We said like, nah, we see less. So what's your take, Cindy? Like where's it heading right now?
I think that, yes, it's going to continue. It's got to, because Google has invested so much in the Internet of Things and voice-activated smart things that are around that either don't have a screen or don't always have a screen that you can watch, like in your car. And so they have to be able to answer questions in context. So we've always thought about search in context, but questions in context, there's more to context than just the question that you're asking. Like if you do a voice search in your car, then you're likely going somewhere and preparing for an event, right? That's going to happen when you reach your destination. So what does poison ivy look like if you're going on a hike? Stuff like that. And trying to get smarter about letting people access that information. So what does poison ivy look like? Sending pictures to the phone and automatically downloading it in case you're out of signal when you're hiking, or something like that, where they've got to anticipate and kind of turn it into a chess game where they're looking not just at the next need, but the next couple of needs.
Right. Makes sense. And like format-wise, is there anything kind of new that, like, I mean, because you were always quite quick on like spotting like integrations. I was like, well, I've never seen that stuff again. Like, is there anything that kind of recently came to your radar where you said, well, this is new. This is stuff that people need to be aware of?
Yeah, data integrations. It's something that Google's gotten really good at with COVID, where they're starting to show a lot more interactive graphs. And so I think that, the new hot thing that everyone's going to jump on for a little while might be marking up data sets if they have them, so that you can have an interactive data set that shows up in a SERP, kind of like a featured snippet, but you don't even have to write the text. You just have to have the data set that responds to questions that people might ask in a search.
Right. I mean, Dominique, that was something that that we talked about as well, right? If I recall correctly, also like the change of the search results in general, when kind of we saw the left-hand navigation bar again, and some of those things.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, in terms of those, the Corona sticky menu we saw on top, of course, and that also which came up, I think, in September last year from the German government, those health portal thing where all those how's it called, like diagnosis from
and treatments, right?
And treatments, which is super interesting. And I saw a lot of opportunities, of course, there in terms of content. That gives me I mean, for Bastian, we had a discussion about that also last year, and for Bastian was like, okay, are we back now in, I don't know, 2012 or whenever it was, but yes, super.
We had this navigation on the left-hand side, right? Years and years ago, I even had to dig out this screenshot from archive.org. I was like, I have seen that like 100 years ago. Exactly. So I was like, So, I mean, Mike, what's your take? I mean, Cindy has been saying one thing which I found quite fascinating. Like, and I'm getting bored, but I'm curious what you say. So, like, marking up data sets and using schema data and JSON-LD and all of this fascinating, highly innovative topics. I mean, Google is still not good enough, or what?
Well, first, I want to give Cindy her flowers. Like, I really appreciate, you know, especially with the Fraggles topic, how she was like waving the flag years ago, and everybody's like, what is this? This is so long. What is she talking about? And then, you know, we all saw it and we're like, oh, you know, passage indexing. It's like, yo, Cindy's been talking about this for mad long. But anyway, is Google not good enough? Sounds like what your question was.
Yes.
Yeah, Google is not good enough. Like, I mean, just like generally speaking, think about how bad Google would be if SEOs didn't exist. You know what I mean? Because like we do so much to like give them inputs that work for what they're trying to do. So yes, I think that they have to continue to improve and think through, like, you know, like Cindy's saying, there's so many different contexts, not just like the context of you as a person and what you're about to do and what you've shown proclivities for doing, but also context for devices and, you know, where are you sitting right now? Like, how should you be surfacing this information? And so I think their continued quest is to be like the presentation layer of the internet. So, what are different ways that they can surface this information? And I think Cindy's whole point of like, okay, being able to say like, hey, here's an endpoint where you can pull all this data and then show it in a variety of different ways. It makes a lot of sense because generally speaking, that's where the web is going, right? Like if you think back, I think it was a talk that Jono had gave where he talked about like, you've got this central repository of data and then you present it in a variety of ways. Why don't we just surface it like as an API directly to Google so they can show the things that are pertinent given the user context? So I think, yes, they do have to get better, but also we need to get better about like how we surface that information because the web is still an unstructured mess that they're trying to make sense of. And even though they've said like, hey, give us structured data, there's still a lot of things that don't really fit into those vocabularies that currently exist. So there's still a lot more to do. But, you know, it has to be on both sides. And I think that's part of why Google is continuing to prioritize the speed aspect so that they can ingest more of that stuff easier and then show it in a variety of ways.
Well, and I'll jump in and build on what you're saying, if it's okay, is that, you know, I agree Google is the presentation layer of the internet, but what they want to be is the transaction and the entertainment layer of the internet. And that's what they're building towards. And I think that what we have to remember as SEOs, and to both of your points that Google is not good enough, yes, it's constantly evolving and getting better, but we have blinders on to what they still suck at. And we forget that they don't actually do a great job at some things. And so I think that we're going to see, I mean, if I were Google, here's what I would be working my butt off on. And they are. This is exactly what they're doing. They are transcribing every video and every podcast because they're much better at written words than anything else. So they transcribe everything and then they surface videos and podcasts based on the words. They're not actually, I think, considering videos as related to images as much as they are just related to podcasts or text. They've shifted their model to say we can surface anything, or we want to surface anything anywhere, and to be the entertainment layer, we need to do a better job of authenticating real versus fake content, or, you know, real versus fake videos and real versus fake news, and be a source of truth that some people think they are, even when they're not as good as they want to be all the time. Like I saw something on Twitter yesterday that Danny responded to where someone was implicated in a crime as a knowledge graph. And they were like, hey, can you take care of this? And that's illegal. Like you can't say that someone's guilty of something that they're not in a public forum like that.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. They're still bad at facts. And that is a primary thing that people go to Google for, is to get facts. But
have you?
Okay.
Yeah. No, go on.
I think there's another aspect of this that needs to be considered is Google a public service? And in a lot of ways, when you think about it, it kind of is, just for how deeply ingrained it is in the world, right? Like I remember we were on the way to B was about to give birth to Glory, and I was like, I Googled, where do we go once we get to this hospital? And it just kind of brought to mind, like, these are types of things that people need to know to exist that we go to Google for. So is it a public service? And if that's the case, then how do we balance that with this idea of it being this entertainment layer? Because those two things are kind of like diametrically opposed to some degree. So I don't know, just a thought.
Facts is a very, very interesting, actually a very interesting point. And I think I passed that in our internal chat, right? Yuya, I think I sent it to you as well, saying, like, what is this thing that they just launched the other week? Like everything great ad, good ad, like this comparison thing. Google's best things.
Yeah.
I mean, this is an interesting beast if you haven't seen it, right? I mean, Yuya, what's your take from a paid search perspective? Like it looks like they're just kind of squeezing wherever they can, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think obviously they're gonna try and push their formats wherever they can. Having to have made way for other comparison shopping providers in the past. This is just, again, a step to kind of get back what they had. I'm not sure how okay that is, actually, to be honest, with that whole thing and lawsuit that happened, to be honest, because then this is, again, them just pushing their own
property.
So,
and it stands above everything, right? So like if you kind of go on an ultra generic term, you now get like a Google recommended section of saying, well, this is the best thing for X, Y, Z. I think this is. I have my doubts that that's going to hold court in like anywhere over Europe. I honestly have my doubts.
Yeah, are you guys seeing the SERP feature where it lists your competitors as well?
Yeah, this is also great.
Ridiculous.
Yeah. This is also quite interesting, actually. I meant to, like, Paul, I meant to ask you, because I recall we talked about it also during election, and like the fact checking situation that was going on. I think you mentioned that also specifically on Facebook, right?
Yeah, so I think that whole came up with Twitter together, with Twitter and Facebook to do the fact checking during the elections, which I find a very interesting feature, and connects well with the issue Mike just mentioned regarding the fake news check up, that it seems to be very hard to, let's say, get on social media as well as on other platforms, let's say, news and information which is solid and which you can trust. Of course, there are always factors which change the circumstances of information, and something even of your very, let's say, trustworthy sources. All those sources make, let's say, or here and there are false or wrong. But also, I think it's very important to highlight that those trustworthy sources, they correct themselves and they try to correct what was wrong into something that is right now. And those other platforms which are less trustworthy from our point of view, lack of this correction and rather push the narrative no matter which information was said at one day, whether it was proven wrong after all. So that's why definitely a huge issue here. Maybe it's also, to speak a little bit your language, maybe it is also depending on the number of data sets available to prove a fact that is, let's say, right or wrong, because sometimes information is getting leaked and it hasn't been, let's say, confirmed officially yet.
Verified,
but some sources, they already confirm it as official, and some others rather hold back. And then you have have this one, let's say, user or the one user segment, if you want, so who says, why didn't you say something about this issue? Because the one source says we'll wait until it's confirmed officially, and the other source basically talks about that like they know everything. And if you very, very interesting with the German Rundfunk with this sending station, so all this where we pay our let's say €17.50 fee every month. This is one of the largest information networks on the planet. So basically all other sources are so tiny and just a fraction of information they deliver, which means how can they confirm something before other stations can do?
But I think this is also a bit of the problem, right? I think this is also fundamentally the problem that Google is somewhat facing, is that it's so kind of fractuated. And like, I mean, there's different sources per country, even like, per language, whatever. That it's like, for them, it's probably like an incredibly hard job to get it sorted, right?
Well, I think this is why they're bringing the data sets in, because it's kind of like when you're in a math class and the teacher says, show your work. Like, this is where they're trying to get to a higher level of transparency and also shirk responsibility and say, this is just the data. It's not us saying this, it's the data.
Well, they've actually considered using knowledge graphs as a mechanism to like say whether or not something is factual. Like they have whole white papers about, we've tried rankings based on facts. And they ultimately concluded, and Danny talked about this before, that it didn't work anywhere near as well as PageRank. So they're just like, we're not going to do it.
I mean, to add some more, Mike mentioned, so could Google be a public service? And which, if I go a little bit high with that, so I also ask myself, maybe it's not Facebook, maybe it's not Twitter, but it seems like that social media is also a very strong desire of basically humanity at that age right now. So with that, of course, it's very hard for Google or Facebook or any other platform how to behave with a certain situation, because if they interfere with a piece of information from no matter whom, basically, or which source, you quickly speak about censorship. And there's always, when you censor something, the one side who provides the information and the other one who is against this information. And that's, of course, a challenge of basically humanity at this information age, which seems to be very, very tough to manage.
Tough to solve, yeah.
But let me throw something else in here, and that is when you have better language understanding and you have this concept of smaller chunks of information like Fraggles, rather than evaluating a page for its veracity, you can evaluate things in a smaller portion, fact by fact. You can get closer to the truth. And rather just saying this page is correct, you can say this is pretty true, this is maybe true, this is not so true, right? And you can grade individual things. And I think that's also part of the larger picture.
I was going to say, isn't that basically kind of, I mean, I think, Cindy, we have been both kind of saying that to an extent also, I think in this, the kind of the contribution that we did, I think it was for the guys from SEO.org, like the guys who run like the conference in Istanbul. I think we all spoke there a couple of times, which is always good. But anyway, so what I was trying to say, like, I think there was, so I'm wondering, like, do we maybe with, passage, let's call it passage weighting for a second, to just kind of throw in some more confusion in this entire mess of indexing and ranking. But like, could it be like an early stage of that, right? So like we take the full page, as we always do. I mean, they say they still do that, and kind of, as you've been saying, like, apply some more, let's say, classic factors to it, right? Or weightings to it. And then I think, as far as I'm concerned, they take a certain extract that's somewhat like related or more related than the rest of that to a query, right? And then you could bump it up. So I think this is somewhat what you're saying, right? So it could be like an early stage of like potentially at a later time, like score everything individually and create like a huge, like, bigger score out of that, right? What's your thought? Is that something that can happen?
Yeah, I think so. And I think, I don't remember where I saw it, and I thought it was from Google, but my memory, it could be Facebook. But I remember, I think it was Google, where they were showing side-by-side facts that are kind of pro and con. So think about something like global warming or something like that. Source says this, and the opposite side of this coin is facts is this, and it kind of gives you both sides of the argument, and that's another way where they can kind of wash their hands and say, this is not our fault, whatever you decide, here are some ideas, here are some thoughts that seem to relate to each other.
Well, Bastian, what you're describing, I think they're already fundamentally like set up to do, is right, like the way that pages are understood to begin with is by breaking them down into tokens.
Has to be,
and so on. And so to that end, there's no reason that can't say like, all right, we've already broken the page down this way. Let's now run it through this one function to score the truthfulness or fact worthiness or whatever, trustworthiness of this actual statement. So there's no reason that they can't do it. It's just, do they want to do it?
Mike, let me throw a question to you and Bastian, a technical question. Tell me, so on a podcast that I did with Martin Split, he said that the thing that finds passages is a different system from the thing that finds featured snippets. And I was like, yeah, different system, same tech. Like they copied the code and tweaked it a little bit. But like that seems I like Martin. And I think that's probably what someone told him, but that sounds disingenuous. That sounds not so truthy.
So I think that could technically be true, right? Like think about it. Like perhaps what they do is they run the page through all the tokenization things, and then they run it through one thing for featured snippets. They run it through another thing for passage stuff. Like there's no reason that they couldn't do that.
But it's probably very similar.
Right. No, I agree with that. I agree with that. It's like the function is written in a very similar way, and then it's like, I want this rather than that.
Yeah, it's more like different output.
Yeah.
But I think what it also can, I mean, that would also infer that, like, if you would do it, because I mean, featured snippets are kind of semi-live, if that makes any sense. They kind of change relatively frequently, right? Or can change relatively frequently. Let's put it that way. I think I'm not so sure that they're willing to do, like, I would imagine the concept of scoring certain elements just is more kind of probably taking more resources, if that makes any sense. So maybe they have, again, I think it's somewhat the same, using input and then providing a different output, but like maybe there's also different kind of, intervals or iterations that they're doing certain things to just save on resources, in my mind. And maybe, at a later time, it just probably is an isolation of that, because I feel like in a way right now, like featured snippets is something that changes so often. Like, sometimes a huge chunk goes, and there's all of a sudden something entirely new. So it feels much more volatile. So I think maybe they need more like the speed on that angle to be more flexible in the way of testing things and seeing what kind of the adoption looks like.
Well, I have one more theory. So something that keeps me up at night sometimes is like, what happens when there's a hole in the internet and the internet doesn't have an opinion on something, right? Like if we say, if I were to search for, is Joe Biden an alien? Unless someone has written an article that says Joe Biden is not an alien, then the answer might be yes, or it might be maybe. We don't know, right? You have to answer all the negatives, or there's a hole in the internet, and that's where a lot of the fake news and weird rankings come from. And so I think passage ranking is partially to fight that. And so that's why they want to be able to surface things that otherwise wouldn't surface because they're drowned out on a long page. And they're saying it only affects 12 or 7% of the queries. And so what if perhaps someone has written an article that says Joe Biden's not an alien, but it's only in Italian? They can answer the question in Italian, but they don't have the right keywords to answer it in English. So what if they're trying to fill holes in the internet where there's not a good answer in every language, but there's one good answer that we found that seems right, but it's only in one language? Maybe they're separate processes because they want to be able to translate and answer questions where there's just not a whole lot of data. Whereas featured snippets, there's a lot of data, a lot of competing sites.
True, yeah.
Maybe that's why.
Case though.
What?
Like that's just like a super duper edge case right there.
It's supposed to be about edge cases, according to Martin.
No, I get it. I'm just saying that fundamentally, like when we think of, the algorithm and whatever, like a lot of us think of it as like this one, giant equation that does everything.
Yeah.
Really,
Which
it's a
is not
series
true.
of microservices, right?
Yeah.
And so,
Yeah.
when we're talking about passage ranking versus featured snippets, like those could be two distinct microservices, and again, same inputs but different outputs, right? And so, like, also how those things are stored in the doc server versus the inverted index and all other stuff could be very different. But to your point of like filling the holes, I certainly believe that's what they're trying to do. It's just that, there's also there's a lot of layers to it, right? Like there's the ambiguity of the sentence, is Joe Biden an alien? Like, what does that mean? Right? Like,
By the way, we'll wait for this, so it won't be a hole anymore.
Right. And so like them first understanding what that means, and like of course breaking it down to entities, like what is an alien, what is Joe Biden? An alien could be someone who lives in a different country or is from a different country or from a different planet or whatever. So I just feel like there's a lot of ways for that to be solved before we even get to something as complicated as what you're talking about. But in the cases where these edge cases do exist, it does make sense that they're trying to fill it this way.
Yeah, I think I'm quite curious what's going to happen on that front. But I guess we just have to wait out and see. I think what we do not have to wait for, taking that now, is a lot of other changes that we're currently seeing. Right? I feel like that just the pace overall of stuff happening just kind of has increased in the last months. Again, there was a bit of I wouldn't say slowdown, but everyone was kind of focusing on providing something around COVID. We kind of talked about like change of presentation layer and like additional information and whatnot. I get where it comes from, right? Like we saw, adjustment of schema markup just for like opening times of small businesses and whatnot. So there was a lot of stuff that was kind of somewhat tailored around that. And I think and that was quite surprising for me at the time, Google kind of pushing, certain initiatives that they had set a date for, further back. That really surprised me to an extent. Like I think one of the things was like the initial deadline of like this full mobile first, mobile only, whatever you want to call it, thing that has been postponed. But also, and we spoke about that a couple of weeks back actually with Yulia on the paid search front. It's kind of the same, right? You had this massive collection of things where Google was kind of pushing hard on rolling a whole lot of things out that people were not overly happy about, right? I mean, at least it feels like it. And I think if I recall correctly, I just saw you prepping kind of a snippet for SMX Advanced, which is kind of happening, I think in June time this year. And
Yes.
So what are you gonna talk about? What's the direction of your thoughts around it?
I mean, it's a direction we have for now.
It's a direction. The direction is good.
We still have to work.
It's like
through.
Mike's book, right? It's a direction at least.
Yes, exactly. But
it's also
for
like
sure,
my SMX Advanced talk. It's happening, but who knows?
There we go.
Good, I'm not the only one. So we're planning. So I'm planning on talking about having gotten less and less data over time now from Google with all the changes that have been happening, them kind of removing search term data. There was this crazy thing that we analyzed that it seems like only every 5th keyword impression we get actually in the search term report, which is insane. It's crazy. So it's actually the share of search terms we don't see anymore and can't analyze anymore. They're bigger and bigger. And I mean, there's ways around it by checking in Google Analytics. And I mean, we'll see how long those ways around will stay there. But basically what we want to just touch upon is what you can do besides all the automation that Google is offering and kind of saying, hey, you should use automated applied recommendations, which, my opinion is quite clear on that we are not a fan of this, that you should just work with, your own automation, or there's third-party tools and many other things to kind of stay in control over your account, despite having less and less data, and Google pushing their solutions on us because they really putting us into a very difficult spot. We have to rely more and more on their machine learning, their bidding. I mean, let's be honest, they have all the data, so their smart bidding has become so much better over time. Back in, I don't know, a few years back, it was a huge benefit that we had our own bidding tool. For example, we were one of the first that had intraday bidding, having bidding adjusted every hour of the day. This was something that was not possible back then. And now Google caught up so much with all the machine learning, and now everyone's like basically already using Google Smart Bidding, and then they're putting all those things on top where you're just more and more depending on them. So it's gonna be a bit more about the side of automation that you can consider, that you have a bit more control with. So it's like, creating some of your own, because basically we have access to most of the data with the Google Ads API. So putting that into BigQuery and working with that there, really working on your own recommendations, maybe based on your best practices, not only fully trusting Google with everything you do. It's maybe a way forward, and that's something we want to showcase and work on.
And address a bit,
exactly. We want to create something nice that we can also share with people in after the session. So should be pretty exciting. I'm looking forward to working through that.
So Paul, I mean, you're kind of facing a bit of the same problem, right? I mean, not entirely the same, but I think one of the topics that we addressed also was around some of the changes that kind of Apple is pushing out.
It is the iOS 14.5 update, and just yesterday on my iPhone in the settings there was a new a 1 and then this red bubble around that, which means there's a software update, and then I always ask myself, what's the next iteration? But the latest one is actually 14.4, and then they added 14.41 and 2, so they somehow prolonged the deadline for Facebook and some other social platforms until the 14.5 update is finally released. Actually, as far as I heard of, it should have been released by at least a week ago. So we can expect it any day, but it seems like this is not going to happen before Easter, I do believe, because I think Apple has enough respect to not push it on a Thursday and to leave it open.
We shall see about that. I mark your words. I mark your words on that.
Might be quite surprising, but all the adjustments have been more or less done already in all the different ad accounts. So we do believe you just need to advertise a little bit more. I don't want to say aggressively in a negative word, but with shorter, let's say, customer journey parts, because you have only the 7-day click attribution window on your conversion campaigns and catalog sales campaigns. That means for me, actually, since you have the possibility of 8 conversion events, someone who visits your website for the first time, adds your product to the cart and does a purchase checkout, for example, that you need to focus on those 8 funnel steps and try to push a user in the 7-day window per click. So that is actually, if you see it like this, a very nice framework you can work with, account-based, and it puts your creativity on another level, because you need to basically, if you have to put the user back into the purchase process for your product or service, you need to be creative, and you need to have arguments, you need to have your USPs ready, so you always get the user back in the funnel. And that is not only for Facebook the case, but actually for all social platforms. And also another one, Snapchat, they come up with a new solution, with a better solution when it comes to tracking with that. So I really like it. So they have no other choice than to go with it. And we will see huge changes, everything that is around server-side tracking, no matter whether it's Facebook, Snapchat, TikTok, maybe sooner or later. And I'm very excited for that. And the same goes for what Julia said. You actually, all the platforms rely on that you pick the right marketing partner for your basic issues, because some of the things you cannot really handle yourself sometimes anymore. So it depends on the user's shop system, for example, where Shopify is just a very great example of integration. What you can do, or what you need to do, or what you can do manually, and what you rather outsource to a certain tool, platform, or service at that point.
So, Mike, I mean, you guys as an agency also, I mean, you of course do, heavy kind of tech SEO stuff, but I think you also do a lot of, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but like you also do a lot of like high level, like strategic consulting, like not only on tech SEO, but like search in general, right? And digital strategy. So like, is that, I mean, I suppose this is something that you guys have seen as well and potentially played with. And if so, can you kind of share your thoughts around like, this entire like move to a serverless or like server side tracking instead of client side, unifying data sources? Is there anything that you kind of came across where you said, oh, look, this is maybe something that people should investigate or kind of have a thought on, or like how would you solve it, full funnel? Is there anything that you think is kind of worth mentioning? Tools, approaches, whatever.
It's a big question. So
yeah, it is. I know.
Just measurement in general is something that everyone needs to take a step back on and like think about. How can we do better first party stuff? And so it really goes back to a lot of things that I've been pushing for a long time of like, get someone to log in, enrich the email address, track all types of events and so on, so that you can, effectively have the level of intelligence that you need. I don't know that I have any like specific tools or tactics that are things that I haven't been saying for years. But like as an example, whenever you collect an email address or enrich it with like full contact or clear bid or something like that, so you get the demographic and psychographic data. And then again, it just goes back to things like event tracking. Like how can you get the granular level insight on that user? Because you're going to miss out once they like, if you're not connecting them to server-side cookies or whatever, you're going to miss out on really understanding who that user is. So get as much data as you can, as fast as you can, and then store it yourself rather than like.
That's probably a very important point, right? Because I feel like a lot of people have been relying actually on not doing that themselves, but just have it sit in some whatever platform, right? And I think this is one of the crucial things that we've been doing as well. Like a lot is kind of unify and then build like the data lake on a system that we kind of get the data still, and not rely on something else.
Yeah, exactly. And the sooner that like if you're using something like GA360, the sooner you move to getting it all in BigQuery, like Yuli was saying, and then again, continuing to enrich that with the data that only you can create, the better your data set's going to be. Because, if you're not doing stuff like that already, they're going to flip a switch and then suddenly you're not going to have anything. You're like, what do we do?
Exactly.
And I'll jump in here. So this is not my specialty, but I do have one thing to add, which is it seems like, for years I was talking about PWAs, and one of the points that Google had for PWAs was that they could be a one-click sign-in, one-click purchase kind of layer, and this was like there being the transaction layer. Like they positioned it as like they were being like very genuine and honest and giving you free code, but I think the social media platforms especially saw right through that and said, no, we're not going to be a PWA if we have to do this, or even if we're pressured to do this. And so we've seen a lot of, it seems like backpedaling on PWA because of privacy issues, where Google was like, trying to do this crazy positioning that just wasn't going to work, and was going to be totally abusive to everybody else.
Well, that kind of brings up a good point, Cindy. Like, Google is talking, or everyone's saying like, oh yeah, let's get rid of cookies, privacy, blah, blah, blah. All that's going to do is create data monopolies for these companies. Like it's going to make it so much better.
And data silos, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Which is, good news, bad news, more privacy, less ability to target ads, right? So you cannot complain about the two things in the same sentence. You can't be like, man, Google's a jerk for invading everyone's privacy, and also they steal our keywords and don't let me target my ads properly. Gosh, Google's a jerk, right? You can't have both.
Well, very true. Very true. Very true. So I have another one for you, Cindy, while we're at it already, and you're getting warmed up, I feel. So we're getting there. It's close to getting 9, so all good. So I'm curious. There's a lot of kind of discussions and kind of rumors around like Apple's next move, and I'm just kind of curious to kind of pick your guys' brains. I guess no one really knows. There was also like a fantastic presentation by our good friend Tom Anthony actually at SMX in like just 2 weeks ago. We kind of had a bit of a kind of thought around, what's Apple gonna do? Are they building really a search engine, or maybe they have one already because it's somewhat part of the entire Apple app ecosystem already, right? So that you can already search effectively in within the app. So if so, what are the differentiators? Like, why would Apple go that way? So we're like, what's your takes? And I'm curious to hear it.
Yeah, so people have a really short-term memory on this because Apple has already tried to create a search engine before, and it failed. And they do have a search engine right now for apps, and they work with Bing for Siri. They fail every time. Like, their search engine for apps still relies on a keyword meta tag. Basically, the equivalent. Like limited characters, where like back in 1995 when we were doing SEO and we would write a keyword meta tag and we didn't want to use extra spaces and commas, so we would do keyword, comma, keyword, comma, keyword, comma. That's in the App Store. That exists right now.
So you mean I would be successful then, yeah? Okay, that works. I can do that. Meta tags still works. Fantastic.
The only thing is they're secret. That's the only edge that iOS search has over Google search from 1995 is you can't see your competitor's keyword tag.
Massive.
So I'm not super worried about it. The other thing is, if you think about what Apple has in its database, yes, they have videos. Yes, they have some books, but certainly not as many as Google has in the world, in all of Google Apps, Google Music, YouTube Music. Google owns all of this data, much more, I think, than Apple. Even though Apple has a good name, their good name is for hardware and a little bit for software, but it's also just for like being a closed environment. Like if you get you're getting extra points for being exclusive. And that's not how search is done well, by being like exclusionary and better than everyone. Like, I'm better than you, so we don't need your data. That's not going to work out. The reason Google is successful is because they take all the data and decide if they like it later.
Yeah. I think, Mike, you are actually a Windows user, right? If I'm not totally mistaken, you're not. Yeah. So what's your take? I'm curious.
I think Apple Maps tells you everything you need to know.
In America.
Like go ahead and make a search engine. It's gonna be trash. But the thing is, of companies, I think if anyone could potentially be a competitor to Google search, it would be Apple. But to Cindy's whole point, Google has so much data that there's no way to catch up with what they have in order to be a competitor.
I think Amazon's the better competitor, and here's why.
I was gonna ask that next. Yeah. Okay. Go on.
They make real things show up at my door.
Yeah, but Apple devices are everywhere.
They're not. Well, they're everywhere with rich people in the U.S. They're less. I think they're less of a.
Include the computer though.
What?
If you include the computer, though, that number goes up dramatically.
Yeah, that is true. But they're not putting things on my doorstep. Like when I want paper towels
on your doorstep.
Yeah. So, Paul, what's your take? Like, is it Apple, is it Amazon, or someone else?
Yeah.
Maybe DuckDuckGo.
I really like it. The other search engines, I'm not so much into the topic to be honest, but I really like the approach with the Apple and search. And you have this native function which is Siri, where you also ask a lot of stuff. So I could imagine somehow this connects Apple Search, Siri, and whatsoever. I'm really surprised what you're saying about the App Store and App Store optimization for this. That blows my mind, to be honest. But I agree. At some point, I agree with Mike because I also like to use just Apple apps, like natively using my ecosystem. But if I use the Apple Maps feature and I would like to have the bicycle driveway to work, then sorry, we can't provide you with the data only available in San Francisco. Okay, thank you for that, Apple. So I cannot use it. And of course, this data and the history of data Google and other search engines have, I think you cannot beat that anymore because that scaling is not possible anymore. And yes, of course, you could say there are new technologies and suddenly the whole world is captured at once with satellites and stuff. But I don't really believe in that Apple does it first. It might be Elon Musk at that point, but to bring in some other huge name.
In the sky then, okay.
And we're not even talking about poor Microsoft and Bing.
I was going to ask you next, actually. So go on. What's with poor Microsoft? Let us hear your thoughts.
They've been trying to beat Google's ass for so long, and they've been failing. So let's just, I don't think that there's going to be competition. I mean, to be honest, I would love for there to be more competition. I mean, from a paid marketer perspective, I would adore there to be more competition to Google, because the stuff they're putting on us is getting quite ridiculous now, and they can because they basically have a monopoly. So,
I don't. It makes SEO so much easier. Then people gotta care about anything else.
If Apple were smart, they would buy Bing, because Bing has the chops to at least compete a little bit and make a decent search engine, whereas Apple just doesn't. And maybe Bing's willing to be bought.
Maybe.
Interesting thought.
I'm not sure about that though, but But you know what really surprises me, like, because I think one of the other things that we see a lot in like the non-English languages, obviously, like, so we have Baidu, we have a Sesnam, we have Neeva, and some others. So I think predominantly, and we even see it, I would argue, and like people might not like me for that, but like I would argue that Google is really only good in English languages. Like the stuff that I'm seeing in search results in Germany is just poor, to be very honest. It's poor, and the same is true for like French, Spanish, and a lot of other languages. It's just not great. And I think one of the admittance that they just made is that they rolled out just the one big update everyone was kind of shouting about, and now all of a sudden it goes live in the English language regions only. And I'm like, because your ML is not good enough, like your corpus is not good enough, your training data is not good enough, and frankly you don't care shit about it. That's the point, right? So at the end of the day, do your stuff in English. But then I think if we're coming from this competition perspective, I think the only real entrance right now, sadly, I think what it feels like is two angles. The one is non-English. That's something where you can win. And I mean, so there are some players that actually prove that. And I think the other thing, and I'm curious on your thoughts, because we touched on it briefly already, and I was actually surprised to see that, but like there's a bunch of players coming up that somewhat kind of go more like the privacy route, or like the kind of the way of saying, look, I mean, Google kind of basically, they're only free because they sell your data, if you want to put it to extreme, which is probably not wrong. And I was there's actually, I sadly forgot the name, but there was just recently a big kind of investment round in the States where actually like two former Googlers got like it was a 40 million, 60 million Series B, just because they're building essentially was a subscription based, if I'm not wrong, like a subscription, Mike, you probably know it, right? Like a subscription based approach to a search engine, right?
Yeah, I saw it. I don't remember the name either, but
okay.
I don't like. Why would anyone subscribe to a lesser product?
Yeah, that's. I was curious about your thoughts if you have seen it, like, because I mean, of course, curious as I am, like I kind of signed up for it just because I wanted kind of to see what's behind it. But like I had the same question, right? So the product is less. They kind of specifically said like, well, we kind of focus only on the important things in the web. It's like, It goes back to what Cindy was saying, like Google wins because they are like so broad and include everything.
Right. So it's for the people that use DuckDuckGo already, or people that use Bleco for the 5 minutes that existed. It's not for the general population, right? Like it's going to be a novelty that we play around with for a couple months and then we forget about it. Like Google is so good and free. Why would you use something else?
Well, and think about, play this out. Like, if there's a secret search engine that really is great at privacy, people are going to use Google for most of their things and then go to the really weird stuff that they don't want people to know. And so this other search engine is going to be known for stuff that it doesn't want to be known for.
Yeah, it's going to be the only fans of search engines.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Okay, I see where this is going. So clearly, but I was surprised. I saw the valuation, but then again, valuation of some VCs that applied like some crazy apparently math behind it and kind of spotting a potential that I still don't see yet, but we all might be wrong on that. But I found it quite fascinating, actually.
Well, and I think the whole premise assumes something that might not be true, right? We all care very much about search, and most people don't. Most people just think about it like water from the faucet. It works, it's there. We don't have to worry about where it's coming from or what it took to get it. It's fine. And they don't think beyond that. And to convince people that, number one, they should care, and number two, they should do something about that, that's going to take years, I think. You can tell the story that Google takes data and abuses your privacy, but people will say, like, I don't feel it. When am I being abused? I feel okay.
Yeah. I mean, it's the same is true for like, I think we had this discussion a couple of times in the past already, like, whatever ranks first has to be the best result, which I think we all kind of agree on is slight over simplification. So yeah, I mean, I think this is kind of where it goes, I imagine. So I think we already kind of passed the hour, which is crazy how time flies, insane. But I think I have one. I want to kind of do one final round and just kind of get your thoughts on the thing like that you think is most relevant. It kind of, I mean, obviously it's different because we kind of talk a bit about different channels. But like, if we start kind of with the SEO side of things, right? And Tilly, maybe you want to go first, or I don't know, either way. Like, what do you think? Like beyond kind of. I suppose the passage of the concept of passages we kind of addressed. Is there anything else where it's like, well, this is maybe something that people don't have on the radar, or stuff that you kind of should focus on?
I think that most of the stuff should already be on the radar, but just to resurface it for its importance, I think that being, what I've said is like, be like a diamond, be multifaceted, like prove that you're a real company by having text content, video content, podcasts, unique images. Like Google's gotten much better. I think images and stock imagery is probably going to start to come up more and more, that Google can tell that that's stock imagery and it's not going to help your rankings. But if you have unique stuff, it will. Those are some easy shortcuts to the top of the SERP, I think.
Got it. Mike, what do you think?
I think there's two big threats right now. One is the content parity issue that I blogged about that you disagree with me on.
No, I don't think we disagree. I just think that the passages are more exciting.
And the other thing is that creating content at scale that is of good quality is about to become so much more easy due to natural language generation. I think it's going to be like a ton of different software built on GPT-3 and T5 and things like that over the next couple years or couple months. That's going to make it just so easy to flood the SERPs with so much content. And at the same time, with all the stuff that we're talking about with like the topics and passages and so on, I think Google is shifting to be able to, rank bigger content assets for more of the long tail queries. And so it's going to be far less about, how can I make this very specific granular 500, 750 word page about this long tail query. You're not going to be able to compete as well because these bigger, more robust content assets are going to rank better. So I think those three things at once are going to change the face of how people are doing things in SEO in the next year or so.
That's I need to be allowed for a follow-up because obviously just because I can, and then we move on. But so GTP3 is actually it's a super exciting topic. I mean, like the kind of at scale generation of content. And I think it's still probably kind of early days. But have you seen anything, Mike, or maybe even I suppose you probably have played with it as well, like things that are worth sharing at this stage? Like, because I felt still. I mean, obviously, it's really heavily reliant on the kind of training data that you provide. I think that just goes with the concept. But like, what are your thoughts? Is that really already kind of production ready yet?
It is. So, sidebar: we're building something right now, which is why I'm so bullish on this idea. But there's other things out there. There's like Copy AI, there's Snazzy AI, and the thing is, the tools that exist right now, they're really good at like short form copy. So if you want to use it for, writing ad copy and things like that, they're pretty much perfect for that. Where things start to break down is when you get beyond like a few hundred words. So really, what you need to do is have like a new prompt every paragraph, and then you're going to generate very good stuff. So there, you can definitely get production ready content out of it. At the same time, I wouldn't say like, hey, just fire up GPT-3 around your keywords and then, just publish it directly. I would still say you need an editorial layer, but you're going to get something that's just as good, if not better, than a lot of the writers that you may hire on these different sites out there. And so that's where I'm saying it's a threat, because there's going to be a lot more people that are going to be less careful with it. And they're just going to be like, cool, let's just run it. And it's going to rank. That's just the reality of it. So yeah, I definitely think you can get production ready stuff out of it.
Interesting. Really cool. So Mike, I know that you need to run to your next meeting, so it's totally fine if you want to drop out. We massively appreciate you joining us. We're probably going to continue our final round, but nevertheless, thank you so much for joining. Have a good one and speak soon.
Happy anniversary.
Thanks for joining.
Thank you. Cheers. Bye.
Bye.
So Paul, on the social side, I mean, there's also a kind of a bunch of things happening. What do you think is going to be like the most significant one, like that we kind of need to deal with in the next month?
Still, it's probably the same topic like the last couple of weeks, especially when it comes to tracking and privacy. But as a result, you will see this private click measurement protocol, which Apple hopefully releases very soon and make it work. And the second step is, because that is basically for everything that happens outside of any social platform, will be that they, not only in America, where it's already possible in the US market, but also in the rest of the world, to purchase and to have your checkout, let's say, streak, or your checkout process directly on the platform itself without going to a website. So I do believe that the website can, of course, be something that's then found through search engines, but the whole checkout process has to be done on the social platform without leaving it, so you don't face those tracking issues on the one hand, right? Because those platforms have all the data and can tell you how many users watched your product, engaged with it, added to cart, and purchased it ideally, which by nature makes it possible to track, retarget, and create those lookalike audiences because the user has already agreed on those, let's say, on those terms, because he uses Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, Snapchat, and any of those platforms.
Kind of goes a bit back to what Cindy was saying, just mainly with the focus on Google, right? Cindy, I mean, this is what you've been saying as well, right? They want to be the transactional facilitator in the search results.
Yeah, everyone's fighting for that right, or that opportunity, I guess.
Have you seen any recent stuff that happened in the States? Because I think there's not that much in the European search results, if you so will, like direct integrations or even buy buttons or whatever.
No, I haven't seen anything like that. But I will tell you that, for instance, the social networks sometimes work differently when you're doing an ad and you go to a landing page, differently between the web version of the social network and the app version of the social network. And we've actually seen people who built JavaScript conversion pages, and they were buying Facebook ads, and then it absolutely didn't work when Facebook windowed in their JavaScript landing page.
Okay.
They were spending money to get traffic there, and then people could not convert even if they wanted to, because it's a browser within a browser, or it's a, and that's hard to do.
Yeah, true. Yeah, the tech complexity obviously increases there as well. That's probably also another.
That people should be testing both on the web conversion. If you're buying ads in social, you should be testing your web social media conversion funnel and your app social on both iOS and Android, because it's different there too. This is one of the reasons we got into mobile, is because it's just different everywhere you try and do it. It's a little bit different, and people are spending so much time honing conversion funnels, but then they forget to test in app and web on Android and iOS.
Yeah, good remark. Yeah, very true. So Julia, what are we going to be seeing on the paid search front? What do you think? I mean, less data, I understood, but anything else except for less data and higher prices?
Yeah, exactly. The higher prices I wanted to definitely pick up on, because there wasn't so much buzz about it as the first time it happened with the digital tax being passed on, and that happened again recently with France and Spain being included for Google passing on their taxes to us advertisers, which for agencies will be quite important, because this is not going to stay with only those markets. The rest of Europe or some countries will follow. So that's definitely something to keep an eye on. And also something that's not been talked about very much, but it's just a bit something you have to do, is that you have to now identify yourself, like do like a company verification as a Google Ads advertiser. So they started sending out emails to companies to verify themselves, to again make everything safer. Google really moving into this safe privacy direction. So privacy is obviously still going to be our main concern with Google Chrome. Changes next year, but some of those topics are important to keep in mind.
And just remembered actually one integration that I did see. It's not huge, but it has potential, which is I saw that the Google Assistant can now tweet for you. You can
really?
And so that's interesting because it might enable inanimate objects on the Internet of Things to tweet. Like we all know the bong 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 from Big Ben when it tweets.
Right.
That's obviously scheduled, but it could be that our thermostat could tweet something, or that's an interesting use case.
Yeah, that's an interesting use case actually, because the system is running on like a ton of devices actually. Yeah, that's true. Very nice. Dominique, any further additions, or did we cover it all?
I think something we didn't touch on our not highlights, but what we expect during the next months is maybe, or definitely the topic of the relevancy of UX. I would flag here as well. I mean, of course, we are talking about Core Web Vitals since months now, I guess, for a while. So I think this will be a topic, of course, also during the next months and the whole year, especially when we talk about content and websites, and also like sizes of any kind of PDFs and images and everything around that. So this will be still a topic, of course. What I see as well is when we talk about content is, of course, more like search intent based content productions and content formats and everything around that. So this is something I see evolving during the last years, I would say, definitely, and it's getting stronger every quarter, I would say. So, and this is something I would definitely also suggest to focus on more. So not only based on demographics or based on search engine, but also based on intent, definitely. So build up your content based on that. Yeah.
Got it. So, very nice.
And what's your take, Bastian?
My take? Oh boy.
Yes.
My take,
so
to conclude.
You do not want to miss out your opinion about that.
I'm not sure you want that, but no, I mean, I think there's a lot of points being made that I would completely agree with. I mean, there's a lot of kind of moving parts that as I've been saying. I think what really surprised me, and I kind of mentioned it briefly earlier, is that Google really took this step back when it came to like this entire passage rollout, because it really, for me, was a bit like the admission of stuff not being ready. And I think it goes back to my initial like December thoughts on saying people don't understand the severity and the impact of that thing going live when it actually goes fully live. So I'm still quite curious to see if they sort it out based on like the kind of the data. I suppose it's data modeling issues or like processing issues and language processing issues that kind of come into play here. But like, I think if that thing comes, and I have still like a couple of months until end of the year, so I think this is going to be a huge impact. So yeah, I kind of stick with that. I think on the other hand, on the contrary, probably that's also maybe worth raising. I mean, we have this whole discussion around and you mentioned Core Web Vitals, and I think if you kind of go a bit broader, like page experience in its entirety, and I'm for me, frankly, it feels a bit like it's very political motivated. Like there's a lot of talk around it. There's like Google is pushing it extremely hard. We had it with HTTPS. We had it with some other topics similarly. But it was in the beginning, at least, it was very hard to even like prove any significance in that making a difference. And I think we all know that Google has certain agenda topics that they just need to push forward. And again, I'm not saying speed is a wrong topic per se. The opposite. I mean, we all know that it's super annoying when stuff is slow, but I just don't feel, it feels a bit more like this panic that's not really needed. And what really struck me there was like, I think it was like Cindy probably knows, it was Danny going on record saying, maybe we don't even see this massive impact in the beginning when it goes out. And I was like, okay, this already feels like you like 2 years, well, 1.5 years, you made like a huge fuss around it. And then all of a sudden it might not be that much of a difference. So I don't know, like I have a hard time believing these things these days. So it's like I think it needs all to be taken with a kind of grain of salt, really.
On
So
core
sorry,
can I throw one thing in on Core Web Vitals?
Sure.
If they're gonna make a big fuss out of it, then they need to make sure that their API and all of the tools that pull in Core Web Vitals can give some consistent data. How about that?
Let's not even go there, because there was a huge discussion that also happened at SMX, funny enough. Like some of the questions were like, why does this tool give me this, and why does it give me only ranges, etc., etc. And Martin was kind of, and again, I really like him. He's a good guy. I think they do a great job with like getting info out there, but it's really hard to explain why this is so different without giving more detail. It's just, it's going to be hard. I think his only answer was, this is why we have thresholds and not hard numbers. I was like, okay, maybe that's not good enough, but we shall see what happens. So I'm not fully sure, but I think those are certainly topics to watch out in one way or the other. Yeah. So I think we're gonna call it a day for today, because that was already a ton of content, guys. Thank you so much for joining. Also for those that kind of are still on the stream, much appreciated. It was really good fun. We're gonna kind of put this stuff live and tweet it out to you with like a bunch of like kind of links and stuff that we kind of touched on today. That said, Cindy, again, thank you so much for getting up early. Highly appreciate it. It was really good to kind of see you almost in person. Well, not in person, but at least have you on the screen again. Really cool. Julia, Paul, thank you for taking the time as well. With that, we are switching off. We're going to be back, Dominique, next week, right?
Next week, yes, with our organic search update.
Yes, we're going to do a bit of a recap of what happened in March. There was a lot of things going on. Let's just put it that way. So it shall be another interesting one. That said, we are over and out. See you all very, very soon. Cheers. Bye.
See you next week. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.